this is Warhawk Beyond 2040, and welcome to a very special edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal album review series. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the incredible and impressive catalogue from a musician who I've been dying to talk about on this series for quite some time now. He is my all-time favourite keyboardist, and I consider him to be the greatest keyboard player in metal. And he is to me the Eddie Van Halen of keyboard playing. That's how much of a badass this guy really is. He is the real deal. He is the whole package, and he brings a guitar-like approach to his keyboard playing and is extremely highly versatile and incredibly fearless and can mix it up and burn and shred with the greatest guitarists in the world and still absolutely rock it up on stage on the keyboards. And this guy needs no introduction whatsoever. I am talking about, of course, the one and only keyboardist, composer, and band leader Dererk Sherinian. So, ever since bursting onto the scene in the early 80s, Dererk Sherinian has seen it all, done it all, and played and collaborated with just about every band and artist you can imagine. From Alice Cooper to Kiss to Billy Idol to Michael Schenker to Yngwie Malmsteen to Simon Phillips to Dream Theater. He has also co-founded many supergroups such as Planet X, Sons of Apollo, Black Country Communion, and has currently co-founded Whom Gods Destroy. Dererk Sherinian, to me, is one of the true legends of keyboard playing, and he has such a distinct and recognizable sound. And when you hear him, you know straight away who it is. And there's no one out there that sounds quite like Dererk Sherinian. At times, you can almost mistake his sound for a guitarist because that's how much of a shredder-like approach Dererk Sherinian brings not only to the music but to his playing as well. And as I said, he's got such a distinct musical identity. And as I said, no one else sounds quite like Dererk Sherinian. So for today's special edition, I'm going to be talking about Dererk Sherinian's entire catalogue of albums, which is a total of 10 recordings, 9 studio albums, and 1 co-led live album. And I can honestly tell you now, this is going to be a real challenge. There is no bad album in this catalogue. They're all different. They've all got very special, prominent guests featured on this album. Any one of these albums could be number one. That's how remarkable and strong Dererk Sherinian's catalogue of albums really is. And there's no weak album. They're all strong, well produced. Nothing bad to say about this catalogue whatsoever. Obviously, there are some albums that are better than others, but I think what people will find very enjoyable about Dererk Sherinian's music is, as I said, there's no bad album. Any one of these albums you can just pick up and listen to. You know, it's not like which album should I start with first. Just find one and listen to it. I would recommend any of these albums. That's how good Dererk Sherinian's solo catalogue really is. You know, as I said, he is the real deal. So, as always, I am going to be talking about each album individually, and I'll choose which one I think is the best one. And trust me, this is going to be very difficult, but at the same time, very enjoyable. So, we're going to start with the first album, which came out in 1999, and this is the one that kicked this whole thing off, Planet X. So, after leaving Dream Theater, Dererk Sherinian would kick off his solo career and release his debut album. And this album would go on to become a very important album for Dererk Sherinian, as this would help set the stage for his band that he would dub Planet X. So you could kind of look at this album as the first Planet X album as far as the band is concerned, but it's still very much Dererk Sherinian's solo album. And boy, oh boy, if there was ever anyone who wanted to make a statement, Derek Sherinian definitely did that and then some. He went out there and absolutely kicked the door down and just blew everyone away with this kick ass debut album. I never forget when I first heard Planet X, I thought, holy smokes, what the hell is this? I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I've heard a lot of keyboard driven albums, but nothing really truly prepared me for what I heard here. I mean, I loved Derek Sherinian's playing in Dream Theater. That was how I first became aware of him. But once I heard this album, it was almost like Derek Sherinian just busted out of a cage and just absolutely went wild and really brought a monster like approach to his playing. And I remember hearing this thinking, I don't ever remember Derek playing like that in Dream Theater. I mean, there were little rumblings, but whew, he really came to play and he came, he conquered, and he kicked ass. And this album does that and then some. So let's have a look, shall we? So there's a little quotes from Alice Cooper talking about Derek Sherinian's time playing with the band. Look how young he looks there. And there is the band. So we've got Derek Sherinian on keyboards, Virgil Donati on drums, who would go on to be a very important collaborator in Derek Sherinian's career, Tony Franklin on bass, and Brett Garside on drums. A fantastic killer band, a great collection of talent, and some monster players on this album. Whew, dynamite stuff here. So all of the compositions are co-written by Derek Sherinian and Virgil Donati, with a co-credit from Derek Sherinian, Virgil Donati, and Brett Garside. But this album, Planet X, absolutely, completely rocks. So to kick things off, we got the epic three parts suite Atlantis. Boy, oh boy, just that first track alone gives me goosebumps. So we've got part one, Apocalypse 1470 BC. You could not ask for a better opener than this. Then we got part two, Sea of Antiquity. And then we got part three, Lost Island. Crab Nebula, Box, Money Shot, Day in the Sun, State of Beryllium, Space Martini, Brunei Babylon. Wow. 47 minutes of kick ass music. And I can tell you now, Derek Sherinian absolutely rocks. Virgil Donati brings a lot of power in his drumming. And Tony Franklin and Brett Garside, they're just monster shredders. This whole band absolutely rocks. And if I was to ever recommend a Derek Sherinian album to anyone who is interested to check out his music, I would definitely start with Planet X, because this album to me really helped change the game as far as keyboard players being lead players. Keith Emerson got the ball rolling back in the late 60s and in the 70s with the NICE and ELP. But I think for me, Derek Sherinian helped redefine the game and took it to the next level going forward into the 21st century. And he showed that keyboard players can be on the same footing as guitarists. You know, keyboard players are not just there in the background playing harmonies. You know, keyboard players can burn it up, and there have only been a little handful of keyboard players that can go toe to toe with guitarists. Chick Corea, John Lord, Jan Hammer, and Jordan Rudess. You know, there's only a little handful of guys who can, you know, hang with guitarists quite like that. And Derek Sherinian is right near at the top. as far as hanging out with those guys and playing on an equal footing. So the standout tracks for me is obviously the Atlantis trilogy. Love it. You know, for me, if this was the only track or piece on the entire album, it would still rock. Money Shot's a great track. State of Delirium's another great track. Money Shot's great. The whole album is just amazing, but those tracks I mentioned really stand out to me. And as I said, Planet X just absolutely rocks. And as I said, this would kind of set the tone for what the band Planet X would be all about. So you could kind of look at the band Planet X as an extension and continuation from Dererk Sherinian's first solo album. But what a debut, and one of the greatest debut albums I have ever heard. So there you have it, Planet X, fantastic debut album from Dererk Sherinian. And the best part about it is he's only just warming up. Tremendous stuff. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2001, and this one is called Inertia. So Inertia is the second Dererk Sherinian solo album, and it's a follow-up from his debut album Planet X, and it's absolutely fantastic, and the music and the playing really packs a hell of a punch. And we've got some very notable special guest appearances from Steve Lukather from Toto, Zakk Wylde from Black Label Society, the legendary Simon Phillips, and Tony Franklin, who appeared on the first album, Planet X. So let's have a look, shall we? And we've also got some other special guest appearances from bassist Tom Kennedy from the Dave Weckl Band, the legendary violinist Jerry Goodman from Mother Hishnal Orchestra, and we've also got the legendary Jimmy Johnson, who's played with Steely Dan, Alan Holdsworth, Lee Ritenour, and many other big names in the world of jazz and rock. And as I said, this is a great follow up from Planet X. And most of the compositions are co composed by Dererk Sherinian and Simon Phillips. And there's a couple of co credits from Virgil Donati as well. And there's a couple of cover versions as well. Now, Simon Phillips in particular would go on to also become an important collaborator for Dererk Sherinian, as he would go on to produce most of Dererk Sherinian's solo catalogue, especially on the more later albums. And what can you say, really? Aside from being a great producer, Simon Phillips is one of the greatest drummers on the planet, and he is a monster player. So, tracks we got here are the title track Inertia, featuring Jerry Goodman and Tom Kennedy, and Steve Lukather and Simon Phillips. Then we've got a legendary cover version of Edgar Winter's Frankenstein with Zakk Wylde burning it up on guitars. And we've also got Simon Phillips and Tony Franklin. And Dererk Sherinian, he's just all over the album. He is a monster keyboard player. And at times, it's almost hard to forget that, you know, sometimes you think that there's a second guitarist, but that's actually Dererk Sherinian. You know, he's such a kick-ass keyboard player. Mata Hari, Evil Knievel, La Pira Loca, and we've got a jazz standard played Dererk Sherinian style Goodbye Pork Pie Hat, Astro Glide, What a Shame, Rhapsody Intro, which is a Steve Lukather guitar solo track, which leads straight into its Rhapsody in Black. So, whew, unbelievable stuff here, I would say. So, the standout tracks for me, I would say, are Inertia, Frankenstein, What a Shame, Rhapsody Intro, and Rhapsody in Black. But Inertia is a great follow up album to Planet X, and a lot more rockier, a lot more harder hitting, and certainly equally as good as Planet X, the debut album. Tremendous stuff, but some great guest appearances. Some great playing from Dererk Sherinian, great guitar playing from Steve Lukather and Zakk Wylde, great violin playing from Jerry Goodman, and great drumming, as always, from Simon Phillips. But tremendous stuff here, and as I said, a great follow-up to Planet X. So there you have it, In Inertia, tremendous second album from Dererk Sherinian. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2003, and this is one of my all-time favorites from Dererk Sherinian, Black Utopia. Now, imagine having Yngwie Malmsteen, Al Di Meola, Zakk Wylde, Jerry Goodman, Billy Sheehan, all on the same album. That's what you get here. Now, just imagine Yngwie Malmsteen and Al Di Meola playing together. You get that on here as well. One thing I've always loved about Dererk Sherinian's solo albums is the level of star power he assembles for his albums. It's almost like Dererk Sherinian has a long list, almost like a bucket list of some of his heroes or some of his favorite musicians he'd love to have on his albums. And the configurations and the lineups he comes up with for these one-off projects is just absolutely incredible. I mean, to have Yngwie Malmsteen on your album, that's amazing in itself. And then to have Al Di Meola playing on your album, that's incredible as well. Now, imagine if someone said to you, what about if I put Di Meola and Malmsteen together on one track? I would turn around and say, you're nuts. You can never pull that off. He does here. Unbelievable. That's what I've got to say. Unbelievable. Wow. This is one of my all-time favourite albums, Black Utopia. And it's a guitar fest. It packs a punch, just like all of these albums. And the playing on here is just unbelievable. Not just from his guest appearances, but from Dererk Sherinian as well. It's just unbelievable. So let's have a look, shall we? That's pretty cool, you know. That looks like a little scrapbook of all of pictures of Dererk Sherinian and some of his musician friends. There is the track listing of who plays on what. And there's Dererk Sherinian on the old Steinway grand piano. So the first track we got is The Fury, which is like a 51-second guitar intro from Yngwie Malmsteen, who just absolutely just rocks it up. And then it goes straight into The Sons of Anu, which features Yngwie Malmsteen, Al Di Meola, Jerry Goodman, Billy Sheehan, Tony Franklin, and Simon Phillips. So you've essentially got here, think about this for a second, if you're talking about the history of these guys, you've got Yngwie Malmsteen from Rising Force, Al Di Meola from Return to Forever, Jerry Goodman from Mother Hishmal Orchestra, Billy Sheehan from Mr. Big and David Lee Roth Band, Tony Franklin from the first Planet X album, and Simon Phillips from Toto and Judas Priest. That lineup there, that's enough to make your jaw drop. That's just nuts. That's a dream band in itself. Forget about, the rest of the guys who play on this album. Just the names alone, that's a dream band in itself. It's nuts. Then we got Nightmare Cinema, which also has Zakk Wylde from Black Label Society, and Tony Franklin, and Jerry Goodman, and Simon Phillips. Pretty impressive stuff here. Stony Days, which features Tony Franklin and Simon Phillips and Steve Lukather. Whew, that's pretty good there. And then we got a cover version of Star Cycle by Jan Hammer, which also appeared on a Jeff Beck album. And that's got Steve Lukather, Tony Franklin, and Simon Phillips. The only thing that probably would have put this album even more higher than it is already is if we had Jeff Beck on this album, on Star Cycle, burning it up with Dererk Sherinian. I think I'm going to go have a lie down now. And then we got Axis of Evil, Gypsy Moth, which is kind of like a little nod to Al Di Meola's World Symphonia project, Sweet Lament, and the title track Black Utopia. I cannot stress enough how kick-ass this album really is. Packs a punch, the level of star power, the lineups on these tracks, it's just jaw-dropping. It's one of my favourite albums from Dererk Sherinian. And like I said at the beginning, any of these solo albums could easily be #1. That's how strong this catalogue is. So the standout tracks for me is The Fury, The Sons of Anu, Nightmare Cinema, Star Cycle, Axis of Evil, Gypsy Moth, and the title track Black Utopia. But this is a kick-ass collection of material from start to finish. Everybody sounds fantastic. Dererk Sherinian burns it up and really hangs with the best in the world, and showing that he is no slouch and he can more than hang with these legendary cats. So, unbelievable album. So there you have it. Black Utopia, one of my all-time favourite albums by Dererk Sherinian. Excellent stuff. And the star power alone is just enough to make your head drop. It's unbelievable. Great stuff here. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2004, and this is another favourite of mine from Dererk Sherinian, Mythology. Now, just like Black Utopia, I'm going to say kind of the same thing here again. Now, imagine if you had Zakk Wylde, Steve Stevens, Steve Lukather, Jerry Goodman, John Sykes, and, wait for it, Alan Holdsworth, all on the same album. That's what we get here, and I can tell you what, this album really packs a punch, just like all of Dererk Sherinian's albums. Unbelievable. So let's have a look, shall we? So we've got the track listing of who plays on what. Special thanks from Dererk Sherinian to everyone who participated in the making of this album. And this is quite cool as well. You got like a little timeline of Dererk Sherinian's band history from when he started and how long he played in the band and how long he was part of it, from start to finish. I think that's pretty cool as well. And, it's quite amazing how much Dererk Sherinian had accomplished at that time. So the first track we got here is Day of the Dead, which features Zakk Wylde, Tony Franklin, Brian Tisci, Jerry Goodman, and Alan Holdsworth. Now, just think about that for a second. Jerry Goodman, Alan Holdsworth, Zakk Wylde, and Brian Tisci. That's a monster lineup in itself. And Alan Holdsworth, just like always, delivers one of the most jaw-dropping guitar solos you have ever heard. And the thing I've always loved about Alan Holdsworth as well, he's like the ultimate weapon. He just plays there in the background, and then when the time's right, he'll just come forward and just blow everybody away with the most jaw-dropping guitar solo you have ever heard. And he always excels in these guest appearances. And to have the team of him and Dererk Sherinian, that's an amazing and an unbeatable pairing, if you ask me. So we got Alpha Bust with Simon Phillips, Tony Franklin, and Steve Stevens. Then we got God of War with Zakk Wylde, John Sykes, Marco Mendenza, and Brian Tisci. That's pretty good there. Then we got a nice little flamenco Latin flavour, El Flamingo Suave with Marco Mendoza, Simon Phillips, and Mike Shapiro, and Steve Stevens. It's a really tasty little Latin number, and it shows that Dererk Sherinian isn't just confined to like metal and fusion. He can do the Latin as well. That just shows you how highly versatile Dererk Sherinian really is. Going to Church with Steve Lukather, Tony Franklin and Simon Phillips. So you basically got like half a Toto here in a way. Pretty good. Then we got One Way or the Other with Jerry Goodman, Alan Holdsworth, and Simon Phillips and Rufus Philpott. That's heavy. That's really heavy. Then we got The Trojan Horse with Brian Tichy and Marco Mendoza. A View from the Sky with Steve Stevens, Tony Franklin, and Simon Phillips. Another great track as well. And then we got the vocal track called The River Song with Zach Wilde on vocals and guitar. And also got Marco Mendoza and Brian Tichy. But I can tell you now, every musician here absolutely rocks. The guest appearances playing is off the charts. Dererk Sherinian, he's just amazing as always, really burning it up with guitar like shredding solos. And the lineups on here, as I said earlier, are just off the scale, off the charts. It's unbelievable stuff here. So the standout tracks for me are Day of the Dead, El Flamingo Suave, One Way or the Other, A View from the Sky, and The River Song. But Mythology is a fantastic album from Dererk Sherinian, and the level of playing from everyone is just off the charts. And the highlights of Mythology for me is Alan Holdsworth playing with Dererk Sherinian and Simon Phillips. It just doesn't get any better than that. So many legends all coming together and just creating magic, and all the brainchild of one Dererk Sherinian. Does not get any better than that. So there you have it. Mythology, another favourite of mine from Dererk Sherinian. Excellent album. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2006, and this one is called Blood of the Snake. So another fantastic album from Dererk Sherinian, and we've got guest appearances from Billy Idol, Zach Wilde from Black Label Society, Slash from Guns N' Roses, Ingrid Malmsteen, John Petrucci from Dream Theater, Tony Franklin, Simon Phillips, Brad Gillis, and Brian Tichy. Some very big names on there. So we've got pretty much the best of Guns N' Roses, Rising Force, Dream Theater, and many more. Great album this is. So let's have a look, shall we? So we got track listing of who plays on what track. Nice cool shot there of the man himself. And we've also got special thanks to everyone who was a big part of the making of this album. And that's a great shot there of the man himself burning it up on the keyboards. So got the first track, Cesare of Steel, featuring John Petrucci, Tony Franklin, and Simon Phillips. I like it. Great opener. Man Without a Name, featuring Zach Wilde, Tony Franklin, Brian Tichy, and Jerry Goodman. Love it. Love it. Then we got The Phantom Shuffle, featuring Jimmy Johnson, Simon Phillips, and Brandon Fields on saxophone. It's interesting, to hear a saxophone on a Dererk Sherinian album. Brandon Fields on paper, you'd think a smooth jazz guy hanging out with these metalheads. I'll tell you what, he's no slouch. He can hang with these guys. He's don't count out Brandon Fields because he's a sax player. Sax players can rock it out too when they need to. Been Here Before, which has got Brad Gillis, Tony Franklin, Simon Phillips, and Jerry Goodman. It's a great track as well. Then we've got the title track, and get ready for your jaws to drop here, gentlemen. Ingrid Malmsteen, Zach Wilde. There. That's all you need to know right there. Deep breath. Oh dear. That's monstrous. On the Moon, which is quite a nice little atmospheric track with Brad Gillis, Brandon Fields, Tony Franklin, and Simon Phillips. The Monsoon with Zach Wilde and Malmsteen. Oh my god, that's heavy. Prelude to Battle with Malmsteen, and also we got some appearances from Michael Shapiro on percussion and Tony Franklin on bass, and Livian Gasparian and Dimitris Mehlis, and these two play oud and dud ook. So that's quite an unusual instrument to be featured on a Dererk Sherinian album. And then we got Viking Massacre with Yngwie Malmsteen and Brian Tichy, which is a great track. And then we got a little fun track here as well with Billy Idol and Slash and Tony Franklin and Brian Tichy in the Summertime. So anyone who knows that track, it's quite a legendary song. And Dererk Sherinian, he's just all over this album with burning keyboard solos, super shredder mode. So standout tracks to me are Caesar of Steel, On the Moon, Been Here Before, Blood of the Snake, and Prelude to Battle and Viking Massacre. Now this album is a lot more heavier than some of the other albums. It's a lot more heavy metal, whereas the others they were much more in line with like progressive metal. But this one is a lot more like a heavy metal album. I think a lot of that is probably due to like guys like Slash and John Petrucci. Malmsteen is more of like a neoclassical guitarist, but he can get heavy too. And then you also got like the presence of Zakk Wylde. He comes more from a heavy metal background. So this is definitely a much more heavier album compared to some of the other Dererk Sherinian solo albums, but still kicks ass and still a tremendous album. So there you have it, Blood of the Snake. Fantastic stuff. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2009, and this is another favourite of mine from Dererk Sherinian, and this one is called Molecular Hynocity. Now, this album kind of goes back to the roots of like the first Planet X album, and I can tell you now, Molecular Hynocity is absolutely fantastic. And I've always kind of looked at this album as kind of like a sequel to the first album, Planet X, because it's got a very similar style to it. But I'll tell you something now, it's really good and it's ferocious, it's big, it's monstrous, it's wild, it's heavy, it's got everything you want in a Dererk Sherinian album. And of course, just like all of his solo albums, we got some very special guest appearances. So let's have a look, shall we? So we've got Brett Garside, Jimmy Johnson, Virgil Donati, Zakk Wylde, Brian Tichy, Rob Mullez, Rusty Cooley, Tucker Minamono, Tony Franklin, Zakk Wylde from Black Label Society, and the lovely and super talented Tina Guo, who's also featured on cello. So there you have a list of the tracks who plays on what. There is the man himself, and there are pictures of the special guests. And special credits to everyone who played on this album. But this is really, really good. This is one of my all-time favorites. So we got the opener, Antarctica, and that's just kick-ass. Then it goes into the atmospheric ascension, which is just like very spacey keyboard sounds. And you got the guitars in the background as well, which goes into Primal 11. Now, tracks 1, 2, and 3, Antarctica, Ascension, and Primal 11, you could kind of look at this as a sequel to the Atlantis trilogy from the Planet X album because it sounds very much like that. And it's got Brett Garside and Jimmy Johnson and Virgil Donati. And just like it says here, this could have easily been a Planet X track. It's got very similar style to Planet X, and to me, this is probably the best piece on the entire album. These 3 tracks, the way they sync up together, kind of reminds me a little bit of Atlantis trilogy, but it also reminds me of UK's In the Dead of Night suite. In the Dead of Night, By the Light of Day, and Presto Vivace and Reprise. It's kind of similar to that because there are some similarities to UK in Dererk Sherinian's music. Wings of Insanity with burning guitar playing from Zach Wild, great drumming from Brian Tichy, and great bass playing from Rob Mulez. Excellent stuff. Then we got the heavy Frozen by Fire with Rusty Cooley, Brian Tichy, and Rob Mulez. It's unbelievable stuff here. The Lone Spaniard with Taka Minamono and Tony Franklin and the lovely talented Tina Grow on cello. Excellent stuff here. Then we got my Molecular intro, which goes straight into the title track, Molecular Hypnosity. Really, really good track here. And then we got So Far Gone, which is the vocal track and features Zach Wild, who at times does sound like Ozzy Osbourne. It's really, really good. You got this very stone-like keyboard playing and haunting piano work, and then we got Zach Wild's chilling vocals. It's just gives me goosebumps just hearing it. But a great collection of songs from start to finish. And as I said, Molecular Hypnosity is one of my all-time favourite albums from Dererk Sherinian. So the standout tracks for me is definitely Antarctica, Ascension, Primal 11, Wings of Insanity, Frozen by Fire, and Molecular Intro and Molecular Hypnosity and So Far Gone. But the whole album is just absolutely incredible from top to bottom, and it's one of my all-time favourites from Dererk Sherinian. And as I said, this album could have easily have been, you know, a follow-up to the first Planet X album because there are some similarities to the Planet X album, but wow, great stuff here. So there you have it. Molecular Hypnosity, fantastic, and another one of my favourites from Dererk Sherinian. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2011, and this one is called Oceana. So Oceana is a little bit different from some of the other Dererk Sherinian albums. This album is a lot more rockier, a little bit on the blues side, and has more of a classic rock style of the mid 70s. But there's also some prog elements in here as well, but still very enjoyable. And like I said, there's no bad album from Dererk Sherinian. They're all different and they're all fantastic and well produced. So let's have a look, shall we? And as always, lots of great special guest appearances. So we've got Tony McAlpine from Planet X, Jimmy Johnson and the legendary Simon Phillips, Steve Lukather from Toto, Steve Stevens from Billy Idol, and we've also got Doug Aldrich as well. And we've got Joe Bonamassa, Dererk Sherinian's bandmate from Black Country Communion. And as I said, there's some great guest appearances here as well. So there is the track listing of who plays on what. There is the master himself at the keys. And there's the credits to who helped make this album. So, some great guest appearances, some great playing from Tony McAlpine, Simon Phillips, and Steve Lukather as well. And of course, Dererk Sherinian, he's all over this album, and some great playing from Joe Bonamassa. So, all of the compositions are written and composed by Simon Phillips and Dererk Sherinian, and we've also got one co-credit with Doug Aldrich and Joe Bonamassa, who co-composed one track, and also one co-composition featuring Steve Stevens. But some tremendous playing, some great music here as well. So standout tracks for me, I would say, are I Heard That, Seven Sins, Five Elements, Mercury 7, Euphoria, and Ghost Runner. But yeah, some really good songs on here. And a little bit different to some of his albums, but this is still classic Dererk Sherinian, who really burns it up on the keyboards. And Simon Phillips, like I said, one of the greatest drummers on the planet, and he just absolutely kicks ass on the drums, and he's a great producer as well. And as I said, Simon Phillips would go on to become one of Dererk Sherinian's most important collaborators in his career, and his production skills on the later side of Dererk Sherinian's catalogue is just absolutely fantastic. Nothing against the earlier stuff, they all sound great. All of these albums sound great, but Simon Phillips has just got that little bit of an extra special touch that really just makes things sound even better. So there you have it, Oceana. Excellent album and another great addition to the ever growing monster catalogue of Dererk Sherinian. So Oceana would be it for Dererk Sherinian for the next 9 years. He will be very busy, playing with Black Country Communion, Sons of Apollo, and many other different projects. But Dererk Sherinian would return with a vengeance. And this brings us to the next album, which came out in 2020. And it has a very fitting title because it pretty much sums up this entire album. And this one is called The Phoenix. So, just like the title says, Dererk Sherinian rises from the ashes and returns and delivers a kick ass album. And it exceeded expectations. And with Dererk Sherinian, when a new album comes out, it's an event, it's a big deal, and you know it's going to be good. And just like with all of Dererk Sherinian's albums, lots of great special guest appearances. So let's have a look. Oh, yeah, I do like that a lot. That is an awesome shot. And there is the dynamic duo themselves, Dererk Sherinian and Simon Phillips, who pretty much produced this bad boy. So let's have a look what we got here. That is an awesome, chilling picture. The maestro himself on the drums, who really has a big presence on this album. That is a great, great picture there. There's the maestro of the keys. And there's the two geniuses at work. So we got guest appearances from Zakk Wylde from Black Label Society, Billy Sheehan from Sons of Apollo, and Mr. Big, Armin Ra, and we've also got Ron Bumblefoot Fowl from Sons of Apollo, and later Whom Gods Destroy. Jimmy Johnson, we've got the legendary Steve Vai, Tony Franklin, Ernest Tibbs, Joe Bonamassa from Black Country Communion, and we've also got Kiko Lurio. So some pretty good names here. So all of the material is written and co-composed by Dererk Sherinian and Simon Phillips, with the exception of one track written and co-written with Kiko Lurio. And we've also got a cover version of a George Buddy Miles track, but this is a really, really good album. So we got The Phoenix, which is kind of like his take on Van Halen's Eruption. It's a real great opener. Empyrean Sky, great track as well. Clouds of Ganymede, another great track. Dragonfly is great. Temple of Helios is another great track. Them Changes, which is like the vocal track, but still a good track though. Octopus Pedigree, which kind of has little influences of Return to Forever, and Pasadillo, which is another great track. But Phoenix, just like I said earlier, sees Dererk Sherinian return with a vengeance like the Phoenix and just absolutely kicks ass. And wow, one of my all-time favourites Dererk Sherinian albums, and a very strong comeback as his way of saying, I'm back, bigger, badder, and more heavier than ever. And he really packs a punch here on the keyboards, and the production on here alone is just out of this world. Mega props to Simon Phillips for really handling this bad boy. It just sounds amazing. So the standout tracks for me are The Phoenix, Empyrean Sky, Clouds of Ganymede, which has got unbelievable burning guitar work from Steve Vai, Dragonfly, is another great track. Temple of Helios is another great track. Octopus Pedigree is great. But this whole album, barring the vocal track, which is okay, but it's not really what I want to hear. But it's all right for what it is. It's kind of like a little bluesy number, but the whole album itself is just fantastic. I love this album. It's one of my all-time favourites. And as I said at the beginning, any one of these Dererk Sherinian albums could easily be a number one because that's how good this catalogue really is. So there you have it. The Phoenix, Dererk Sherinian, back with a vengeance, bigger and better than ever, and comes through with yet another metal masterpiece. So there you have it. The Phoenix. Excellent stuff. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2022, and this one is called The Vortex. So this is pretty much a continuation of The Phoenix, and this is absolutely fantastic. And Dererk Sherinian and Simon Phillips together is just pure magic, and Dererk Sherinian, he just continues to keep getting better and better, and this is just a great follow-up and sequel to The Phoenix. I just think this album is absolutely amazing, and once again, just like always, lots of great special guest appearances on Dererk Sherinian's albums. So let's have a look, shall we? There is the maestro himself, with all his keyboards. That is a cool shot here. Look at that. That's some serious music royalty there. There's the genius himself. The master of the drums, Simon Phillips. The two amazing cooks cooking up a storm in the studio. That is a really cool picture, actually. I like that. And a cool shot of the man. And there's some production notes and special thanks to everyone who made this album. So we've got guest appearances from Steve Stevens, Tony Franklin, Armin Ra, Nuno Betancourt, Ernest Tibbs, Rick Farabracci, the legendary Jeff Berlin from Bruford, and we've got Steve Lukather from Toto, Joe Bonamassa from Black Country Communion. We've got the legendary Michael Schenker, Zach Wilde, and we've also got Piero Gigondi, Anna Caporni, Carlo Calgari, and Enrico Calcase. And we've also got Mike Stern as well. That guy's getting around as well. And we've got Ron Bumblefoot's Foul from Sons of Apollo and the legendary Jimmy Johnson. So Dererk Sherinian and Simon Phillips play on all of the tracks, and some of these guest appearances absolutely rock. So we got The Vortex, which is very similar to Van Halen's 1984, absolute kick-ass opener. Firehorse is another great track as well. Scorpion is kind of like Dererk Sherinian's little nod to Hiromi Trio Project, which is very similar to that amazing band, which Simon Phillips was a big part of. Seven Seas is another great song with lots of great bass work from Jeff Berlin. Keyline Blues is great because you got two amazing guitar players, Steve Lukather and Joe Bonamassa together. Die Cobra with Michael Schenker and Zach Wilde together. Enough said right there. And Nomad's Land with Mike Stern, which Mike Stern is just a machine. He's great. And Aura Australis, which is like the 11-minute epic. Another great song as well. But all of these songs from start to finish, they're all fantastic. And what more can you say, really? Dererk Sherinian knows how to write a composition. He knows how to write a song. So all of the material was written and co-composed by Dererk Sherinian and Simon Phillips, with a couple of tracks written by Dererk Sherinian and one Simon Phillips composition, and also a co-composition contribution from Steve Stevens. But wow, this is excellent stuff here. So standout tracks for me is The Vortex, Scorpion, Seven Seas, Die Cobra, Nomad's Land, and Aurora Australis. But this is a tremendous album, absolutely tremendous. So there you have it, The Vortex, another favourite of mine from Dererk Sherinian, and a great follow up to The Phoenix. And wow, unbelievable to think that this is Dererk Sherinian's ninth solo album already. And from my understanding, I think we're going to be getting another one very soon. I can't wait. It's going to be amazing, just like all of these albums. So there you have it, The Vortex. Fantastic follow up to The Phoenix, and real kick ass album with lots of great guest appearances from some of the biggest names in music. So there you have it, The Vortex. Excellent stuff. And this brings us to the next album, which came out in 2023. And this is Dererk Sherinian's first live recording. And it's a co-led album, which features Dererk Sherinian and Simon Phillips, and with a kick-ass band featuring guitarist Ron Bumblefoot Fowl and bassist Rick Farabracci. And this one is simply called Sherinian Phillips Live. Now, I have talked about this album before in a separate review, but it is still worth mentioning in this catalogue. This is a live album, and it features material from The Phoenix, The Vortex, Inertia, and Molecular Hypnosity, and also other great Dererk Sherinian solo albums as well. And it's a fantastic live album. The only downside I would say for this album is I wish it was longer and I wish it was a double, because there is some tremendous stuff here. So let's have a look, shall we? That is awesome. Some great pictures there. And there is the man himself on the drums. Let's have a look here. Nice. Love it. Not bad. Not bad at all. So this is just a little bit about how this live project came to be what it is. And also a little bit of talk about the history between Dererk Sherinian and Simon Phillips. And a little bit more here as well. Ron Bumblefoot and Rick Farabracci. Well, what more can you say about these two? Kick-ass musicians, and they can really play. And there's the tracks as well. So we got The Vortex, Empyrean Sky, Temple of Helios, Inertia, Alpha Burst, Barnacus, Seven Seas, Ascension, The Phoenix, and Aurora Australis. Great stuff here. As I said, an excellent live album. Only downside is I just wish it was a little bit longer, and I just wish it was a double because it's so good. And if I'm honest, I would have liked to have seen a Blu-ray phone in here as well, of this concert, because this is so good. So standout tracks for me are The Vortex, Empyrean Sky, Ascension, The Phoenix, Seven Seas, and Aurora Australis. Excellent live album. Hopefully not the last time we'll see Dererk Sherinian going without a live album. Hopefully we'll see another one from him. And who knows, maybe it could be a double. But wow, tremendous live album. Everyone on this album absolutely cooks. Dererk Sherinian sounds fantastic as always on the keyboards. Simon Phillips delivers powerful drumming. Bumblefoot is burning it up on the guitar, and Rick Farabracci, what more can you say? He's a rock solid bass player, and he just makes everything around him sound amazing. So there you have it, Sherinian Phillips Live. Fantastic live album. So after taking a look at all 10 Dererk Sherinian albums, 9 studio albums, and 1 live co-led album, which one do I think is the best one? Well, they're all fantastic. I think they're all great. Some of them are better than others, I admit, but as I said at the beginning, There's no bad Dererk Sherinian album. Any one of these albums could easily be number one. But if I had to choose one, which I think is the best Dererk Sherinian album, I've got to go with the first album, Planet X. I just think this was an amazing debut album with some incredible music and some incredible playing from Derek Sherinian, Virgil Donati, Tony Franklin, and Brett Garsted. I think this was a real statement, and for me really helped not only change the game but help redefine it as well heading into the 21st century. I just think this was a fantastic album, and this one really kick-started this whole thing that we know to this day as far as Derek Sherinian's solo career is concerned. And for me, this is an amazing album and one that I always listen to the most. And as I said before, the highlight of this album is the Atlantis trilogy. I just think it's the most epic piece of music I've ever heard Derek Sherinian compose, and it's just absolutely rocking. It's got everything you want in a prog metal song. Great playing, great sound, great musicianship, great execution. It's all there. Planet X for me is the best Derek Sherinian album ever. All of these albums are great, but for me, this is the one that stands above everything else that he has ever done. And it's just a monster masterpiece. And 25 years later, it still sounds as fresh as the day it was made and released. It's just fantastic. So there you have it. Derek Sherinian, Planet X, my all time favorite Derek Sherinian album, and the best album, in my opinion, that he has ever done. Excellent stuff here. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What's your favourite Derek Sherinian album? Is it Planet X, Inertia, Black Utopia, Mythology, Blood of the Snake, Molecular Hydnosity, Oceana, The Vortex, The Phoenix, or Sherinian Phillips Live? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have our favourite albums. You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal album review series, where I'm going to be taking a look at the catalogue of Planet X. So make sure you don't miss that. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.